When the missionaries arrived, the Africans had the land and the missionaries had the Bible. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened them, they had the land and we had the Bible. This video is inspired by Dante Kyle. If you don't know who he is, he's a used to be professional truck driver turned into a professional talker. And I believe now he has a podcast. I'll put the name somewhere here, but he has a lot of interesting and good takes. Recently, one of his old videos went viral because he states that instead of glorifying Jesus, we need to be giving thanks to the ancestors who paved the way for us, as well as practicing ancestor veneration. And if you don't know what ancestor veneration is, it's basically the practice of giving thanks, offerings to your ancestors. You could also do rituals, offerings, things of the sort in order to give thanks and praise to those who came before us. And let's just say a lot of Christians were upset by this. They weren't a fan of this. There was one specific lady, if I can find the video, I'll include it in this one.
Let me tell y'all something. That Deontay Kyle young man on the Chicken and Grits or Eggs and Grits podcast, he gonna lead y'all straight to the ancestors that are burning in hell right now, demons.
This lady stated that all of these ancestors that we're praising and giving offerings to are burning in hell, and so will we if we practice ancestor veneration. To be quite honest, this really pissed me off for a multitude of reasons, but the main reasoning being that our ancestors are constantly being disrespected by those that follow these organized religions. I personally think that's disgusting. Let's get one thing straight, okay? The only reason why you are here today, sitting, breathing, watching this YouTube video is because of your ancestors. If you can't acknowledge that as a fact, go ahead and click off this video because I already know that skull is too thick for the conversations that we are about to have. If you stayed, thank you for staying. Let's start the conversation. If you're still here watching this video and you're Christian, thank you for just hearing me out, okay? Let me make myself clear. I don't hate organized religion. I think organized religion has its benefits to society, but I also think it has a lot of cons too. I honestly think that you're allowed to believe in whatever belief system that resonates with your spirit the most. I'm not judgmental when it comes to that. However, those that follow organized religion seem to be the most judgmental. I'm also not a fan of how organized religion has been used throughout the years in order to justify bad behavior or bad actions. If you look into the history of how Christianity was spread to these various cultures, there's almost always a use of force or manipulation to get these people to believe into Jesus Christ and God. When it spread to places like South America, Africa, Asia, it was all through colonization. And I hate the way history books, documentaries, whatever, talk about colonization. They always try to make it sound so sweet and pretty and like it was this seamless type of thing. It's always like, oh, the colonizers came to the land, they learned the language of the natives, and they spread the word of the Lord, the end. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like a holiday to you that we are currently celebrating? That's not what really happened. In fact, that's almost never happened in history. Let's use our critical thinking skills. Let's truly imagine what these people went through. Imagine you're just chilling in the village with your homegirls. Y'all are, getting water from the river or fishing, and you see a random white man appear all of a sudden. This is the first sight of a white man you've ever seen in your entire life. You don't even know that he's called a white man. He comes to your land. You can't understand a word that he's saying, but all of a sudden he's taking over your land. He's taking over positions of power in your government. He's taking over profit of your supplies. He's making you laws, and he's forcing you to learn their native language, their language that they speak. And now they're forcing you to obey by a religion that you don't necessarily believe in. You have your own belief system. Now, let's say you don't assimilate, you don't obey the white man. what happens next? Well, you either got beaten into submission or into obeying their belief system of Christianity, or if you were really, really ruthless and a rebel and you really resisted change and wanting to assimilate to this newfound power and control, they would kill you. They would kill you, and then they would use you as an example to your community, your friends, your families, to let them know, hey, if you want to be a rebel, if you don't want to assimilate to our culture on your land, then maybe you're gonna get killed off. So Christianity wasn't really a choice for a lot of our ancestors. It was forced upon them. And this is the same religion that you are following in present day. So with this new power and control that the colonizers had on your land, so came the erasure of our ancestors' traditions, belief systems, practices, even language. They taught us to rebuke our own identities, our own practices, our own culture, and rebuke them in the name of Jesus, and to see it as something as barbaric. They taught us to villainize our own people. And this hatred for our own people has been passed on from generations to generations to generations to generations. Which is why we have this crazy lady now in present day claiming that all our ancestors are burning in hell and anyone who blah, blah, blah. This is why there's so much hatred that exists, is because it's been taught. It's been beaten into us. We have been conditioned to think and feel this way of the unknown, even though the unknown used to be our own practices. I honestly think that African Americans as a group, as a whole, had it the worst when it came to the erasure of their ancestors. And let me clarify, by African American, I mean those that are direct descendants of slaves. So those that were kidnapped and brought to America on this land for generations and generations. I'm not talking about no Caribbean Americans, no Nigerian Americans like me. I'm talking about African Americans, those that have been on this land for generations and generations to come. They are a group that are generations removed from their African ancestry, and this has been done intentionally through slavery. Slavery stripped them of their names and replaced it with their master's names. If their master had an inkling or thought that they were going back to their roots and practicing, African spirituality, they would beat them. They would accuse them. They would use them as examples to instill fear into the other slaves so that other slaves wouldn't get the idea of trying to dabble into or tap into their spiritual freedom, because the masters back then knew that if you were spiritually free, baby, you will become physically free. And honestly, masters were also super careful when it came to slaves learning about Christianity, because in the Bible, it talks about those that were freed from enslavement. So when it even came to slaves being converted into Christianity or beaten into Christianity, they did it very meticulously. They wouldn't let them lead their own sermons for a while, if at all. Typically, they'd have a white pastor leading their Sunday service, and they would only read certain scriptures or verses that would talk about submission and honoring thy mother, thy father, things that basically served the masters into having subservient slaves. If they were allowed freedom into Christianity, it was still heavily surveillanced by the masters so that they wouldn't have rioting or uprootings. So it was done in a very intentional way. So because of that, I see why African Americans have such a deep-rooted tie to Christianity, because at one point it's all they had. They found solace in this religion because there was solace nowhere else. I can understand why African Americans have such a deep tie to Christianity. For African Americans, at least in the present day, it's really hard for them to trace back what their ancestors practiced, because as a group, as a whole, they're so ethnically mixed. So a lot of them have Northwest, East African lineage in their bloods, and they all had different practices on their own. So through all of this, African Americans have established a culture of their own in America that still ties in a little bit of African traditions into their New Age Christian beliefs. You see that when they're speaking tongues, when they're catching the praise and they're dancing and hooting and hollering. Those can be directly tied to specifically West African traditions that you see when they're dancing. Regardless of how far removed you are from your ancestors, there's still a little trace of them in your everyday life. Like, just because spiritually you might not feel connected, they're still coursing through your veins in your blood. Us now in present day, like, we probably have a lot of similarities to those that lived before us. We just would never know it because they're just so far removed from us. 10 generations ago, I'm probably super similar to a great aunt or some shit, and I would never know. But with this extensive effort that it took to erase and convince all these ethnic groups that their original worship was demonic, it really makes you wonder and think, like, why do they feel so threatened? And was there possibly some truth, some answers in the way that our ancestors practiced their belief system? I feel like the older I get, the more I think about this. I truly think that there was some truth and power to what my ancestors practiced, or else they wouldn't have went through the troubles of trying to erase that from our history and from our culture if it wasn't powerful in some way. A little bit about my background. I grew up super Catholic. If anyone ever asks me, what religion are you? I say I grew up Catholic. Since the day I was born, I went to Sunday school religiously every single Sunday from the day I was born up until the age of 18 when I got confirmed, had my baptism, my first communion, my confessionals, and my confirmation. So trust and believe. I was a religious girl. My mom was a devout Catholic woman. It was very important for my mom that we knew who God was and we accepted him into our hearts. That was very important to my mom. Mind you, I'm Nigerian. Tell me how many Nigerian Catholics you know. That don't even sound right. I will say with organized religion, those that experience religious trauma tend to become atheists or agnostics later in their lives, like when they become adults and they have the autonomy to explore their belief systems. A lot of them become atheist or agnostic. Surprisingly, did not go through any religious trauma. I loved going to Sunday school. I had the best time ever, and I surprisingly kind of went to a progressive church, a progressive Catholic church in Texas. Sounds crazy, kind of. Well, I mean, it was as progressive as a Catholic church in Texas can be. But I just remember specifically there was a lesbian couple that would always attend mass with their kids. I had a blast at Sunday school. I had a blast at my church. My 7th grade Sunday school teacher she's honestly the one that radicalized me when it came to organized religion. Or maybe she started my journey in my radicalization. Imagine this southern sweet white woman telling you that Jesus was black. That was my 7th grade teacher, okay? She let us know from the jump, listen, Jesus he's not white, okay? If anything, he looks like her. And she like pointed to this East African girl in my class. And she was like, if anything, he kind of looks like her, if anything. Like, he would kind of look like this. And she would also teach us so much about other religions. Like, she would teach us about Islam, Judaism, Buddhism. Probably was not allowed to do that in hindsight. But I was so appreciative of her teaching us tolerance and being open to different belief systems. And she really left a lasting mark on me because she taught me that there is some truth to every religion. There's no one right way to praise God, and they're all really interconnected when you think about it. Because of that, I think that's why I don't hate religion totally, because I think that in a way, if used correctly, it's a nice way to bring people together. And so because of her and introducing us to this kind of thinking, this critical thinking about religion, it really inspired me to research and look into more about spirituality and just figure out all that I can about spirituality, God, our consciousness, how it all relates to each other. And I think because I grew up in a church that didn't hinder my faith, I think that is why I am so connected to God now. Like, although I don't feel connected to one organized religion, I definitely feel so close to God. This is the closest I've ever felt to God, and it was through that freedom I felt spiritually growing up, not being forced to believe in anything. Well, at least in my head, I didn't feel forced. Because of that freedom that I felt spiritually, it allowed me to truly define my belief systems outside of organized religion. Because of that teacher, I really thank her for that, because when used right, religion and spirituality is very empowering. That's not to say church was all kumbaya for me, okay? I mean, it was a Catholic church in Texas. There were some hateful people there. I remember I had this one specific Sunday school teacher for 2 years. We would call him Peter Griffin because he looked just like Peter Griffin. But he was like your typical Christian Catholic man. Didn't believe in divorce, didn't believe in gay marriage, didn't believe in condoms. He had 6 to 7 kids running around that church Sunday school all the time. Kind of hated his kids. And he was super hypocritical, super hateful, super judgmental. He would always talk about having lesbian friends, but would also say how he condemns what they practice or whatever. Basically, he'd be like, yes, I have lesbian friends. And also, yes, I think they're going to hell. Safe to say I wasn't a fan of that man. I guarantee you 6 out of the 7 kids he had are probably not practicing Catholics anymore. He just couldn't be bothered with them, and they didn't seem to like their father either. No one liked their father. I also saw how hypocritical and judgmental Christians and Catholics can be. I had this one friend growing up who was a Christian. She wasn't Catholic. I forgot what sector of Christianity she was, but I just know she was a Christian. And she was always on my head about being Catholic. And she would always say, praying to saints is a sin. That's a sin. That's a sin. Mind you, this girl was Mexican, so I knew she had an auntie or uncle who was Catholic. So for her to be saying, it's a sin, it's like, girl, shut up. I hate how Christians can sometimes use their faith to feel higher than. And it's like, babes, you are embodying the opposite of what religion teaches you. There's tons of hypocrisy when it comes to witchcraft, spirituality, Christianity, astrology. And that would always confuse me growing up, because Christians will always feel higher than thou for rebuking witchcraft, but they're not seeing how a lot of the practices that they have within their own religion is kind of witchcraft. It is witchcraft. Y'all are doing the same practices. And yes, Christians do spell work, lighting prayer candles, saying the scripture, having altars at the church. This can be considered spell work too. But when people outside of organized religion do the same thing, it's called witchcraft. But when Christians do it, it's called faith. Astrology is condemned heavily in the church, yet the 3 wise men used the stars in order to find Jesus. Tarot cards and psychics are deemed as demonic, but in the Bible, prophets were receiving visions and dreams that were determining their futures. Is drinking the blood of Christ and eating the body of Christ not seen as ritualistic? Like, come on now. So, honoring your ancestors is witchcraft, but praying to saints who have passed on is not a sin. I can go on and on and on and on, but I truly don't have all day. I could write a book on this. Okay, I lied. I do have all day. One of the biggest hypocrisies that I saw growing up when it came to Christianity or organized religion and those that are outside of that was how they made those that were quote unquote other seem barbaric. Like, that was the narrative that they would push in order to have people convert, to have people to believe that, oh, this is the way to get into heaven, is by making their own traditional beliefs and practices seem as barbaric. One of the main propaganda, or I guess proof, that Christians would use in order to make themselves seem like, the right, clear way is by pointing out how those that were from indigenous groups would sacrifice to those that they believed in, like their gods or deities, whatever it was. They used the fact that they did human sacrifice as a practice as a way to kind of villainize them, make them seem barbaric and like, oh, this is demons, this is the devil's work. Like, that's why you should believe in Christianity, because we don't do human sacrifice here. We're the good religion. We're the right religion. No. Did we all seem to forget about the Bible story of the father who was literally seconds away from sacrificing his only son who he loved because God told him to do so? Okay, I think as a society, we moved way too quick from that. Okay, let's bring it back. God told Abraham, hey, your only son, give him to me. Give me him. I want that one. Kill him. He was going to do it. Like, the only reason he didn't do it is because another voice, an angel, I guess, intervened and was like, hey, psych, don't do it. I'm sorry. Is that not human sacrifice? Is that not human sacrifice as well? So why is one barbaric and the other one not seen as barbaric? It doesn't matter if the angel intervened. It doesn't matter that they're trying to test his faith. You're telling me that it's okay to kill your offspring because God told you so? It's okay to kill your offspring because God told you so. I think the last time I heard someone say that, they ended up getting like life sentences in prison. This might be a really niche thought, but I've always thought about asking a Christian this question. And this is going to sound silly, but I've always thought about asking a Christian like, hey, if God told you to sacrifice your offspring, would you do it? And the reason why I don't ask this question is because, one, I'm not rude. And two, because I know the answer won't be a clear no. I know there's going to be a couple of yeses in there, and that bothers me. That really bothers me, that people would consider doing that in the name of God. And they're out there. Would you do the same as Abraham? Would you go ahead and sacrifice your offspring? I know for a fact, I will bet $500 on it. There is a Christian out there that will say yes, blindly yes. But that's not barbaric. All I'm saying is, in the Bible, God is not the nicest God, okay? He is not the nicest God, right? I believe in God, but the way the Bible portrays him, he don't got a clean slate like that. He was drowning people, killing firstborn sons. Is that not barbaric? I don't know. This is a really controversial take, but I feel like we either have to acknowledge that we as a society are barbaric as a whole, Christian or not, or we have to denounce those actions as being barbaric, which obviously they're barbaric things. But you can't just call one barbaric because you think your actions are not barbaric because it's done in the name of God. That's what I don't like. And those that are so hypocritical in their faith are reading the Bible, but they're not truly comprehending the Bible to see the double standards and to notice how the Bible in itself contradicts itself so much. And that's what I have a problem with. I say all that to say, honoring your ancestors and thanking them for the life that you're currently living is not a sin. If that is a sin, then all of Christianity is a sin. In conclusion, I'm glad that there's been a movement going on where in the past 10 to 20 years, people are finally waking up to the contradictions that organized religions have, and people are trying to pave a way or trying to go back to what their ancestors believed in and what they practiced and preach. I think it's cool. I think it's inspiring. I don't think that if you honor your ancestors, you're going to hell. I don't think that if you're following Christianity that you're necessarily wrong in that. Like I said previously, whatever belief system you choose, you have the right to believe in, but don't use your faith, something that preaches you to not hate, to hate onto how others practice their own belief systems. That is my only qualms about it. That was my little rant. But let me know y'all's thought process on this. Are y'all Christian? Are y'all part of an organized religion? Do you consider yourself spiritual? I consider myself spiritual. I really do believe in God. Yeah, I'm thankful that I didn't grow up having religious trauma, because I don't think I would have been as close to God as I am now. I'm gonna stop talking because I need to go to the movies. But thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.